Imagine waking up one morning in Rome nearly 2,000 years ago. Surrounding you is the world's largest and most powerful city. Cobblestone streets teem with people. Merchants open their shops. Caravans of goods stream into the city center. In the distance, colossal structures like the Colosseum and magnificent temples rise high, symbols of the Roman Empire's power. But behind this splendor lies a truth rarely spoken of. Rome wasn't built solely by emperors, generals, or powerful politicians. The empire survived thanks to millions of ordinary laborers who faced daily dangers to keep the colossal machine called Rome running. Some worked deep underground, where sunlight never reached. Some braved the raging storms of the Mediterranean. Others hunted the world's most ferocious beasts, and there were those who stepped into the arena before tens of thousands of spectators, knowing it might be the last day of their lives. So, what were the most dangerous jobs? What professions posed the highest risk of death for the Romans? What jobs meant that simply accepting the job meant you were essentially gambling with your life? In today's video, we'll count down the top 7 most dangerous jobs in the Roman Empire, from number 7 to number 1. And make sure you watch until the end, because the job at the top of the list is not only the most famous, but also so terrifying that many modern historians consider it a death sentence disguised as a profession. Number 7. Sewer cleaners. When thinking about dangerous jobs in ancient Rome, most people immediately think of war, the arenas, or hunting wild animals. But few know that one of the most terrifying professions lay deep underground, completely far from the glamour of Rome. That was the job of cleaning and maintaining the sewer system. To maintain a city with a population of hundreds of thousands, even over 1 million at its peak, the Romans built one of the most advanced drainage systems in the ancient world. The most famous of these was the Cloaca Maxima, a massive sewer system built centuries ago, and whose remains still exist today. It sounds impressive, but for those who had to work inside it, it was nothing short of an underground hell. Every day, they had to descend into dark, damp, and sewage-filled tunnels. There were no electric lights, no protective equipment. The only things that helped them see were often small, flickering torches in the darkness. The air in the sewers was often suffocating and difficult to breathe. Wastewater from thousands of households, markets, public baths, and factories continuously poured into this system. The stench was almost unbearable. But the stench wasn't the worst thing. The real danger came from things the Romans couldn't see. Bacteria, parasites, and infectious diseases thrived in that environment. At that time, people didn't understand microorganisms or the causes of disease. A person could be perfectly healthy at the start of their shift, but weeks later contract a serious illness for which no one knew how to treat it. Besides illness, accidents were also frequent. Old sewers can collapse unexpectedly. Floodwaters from heavy rains can surge in without warning. In just minutes, a worker can be trapped or swept away in the narrow tunnels. Sadly, those who work in this profession rarely receive the attention of society. They don't receive the admiration of soldiers, the fame of gladiators, or have their names recorded in history books. Yet, without them, Rome might not have been able to maintain its cleanliness and efficiency for centuries. That's why sewer cleaning ranks number 7 on today's list. And if you thought this job was dangerous enough, the next one is far more terrifying, because those workers face an enemy where a single mistake could cost them their lives. Number 6. Viges the firefighter. If you lived in Rome in the 1st century AD, there was one constant fear in daily life. It wasn't war. It wasn't wild animals. It was fire. Ancient Rome was one of the most densely populated cities in the world. Most people lived in multi-story apartment buildings called insulae. These buildings were often constructed quickly, using wood and other flammable materials to save costs. Narrow streets and closely packed houses meant that even a small fire could quickly spread throughout the neighborhood. Roman history records many devastating fires, but the most famous is the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, during the reign of Emperor Nero. The fire consumed much of the city for days on end, leaving thousands homeless and reducing many areas to ashes. To combat this threat, the Roman authorities established the Vigiles, often considered the first professional firefighters in history. But becoming a Vigiles was no easy feat. Whenever the alarm sounded in the middle of the night, they had to rush to the scene immediately. There were no modern fire trucks, no high-pressure pumps, no fire-resistant clothing or gas masks. Their main weapons were simply buckets of water, wooden ladders, iron hooks, and basic hand pumps. In many cases, the most effective way to prevent the fire from spreading was to demolish houses in the path of the flames. This meant that Vigiles had to work right next to the most dangerous areas. They frequently had to climb burning buildings to rescue people trapped inside. Wooden beams could collapse at any moment. Roofs could fall without warning. Even without being burned by the flames, they still face toxic smoke in a confined space. Inhaling hot smoke for a few minutes can render a person unconscious. And once they fall in the middle of a fire, the chances of survival are almost zero. It's worth noting that the Vigiles' duties don't stop at firefighting. At night, they patrol the streets, maintain order, and apprehend criminals. This means that besides fires, they also face looting, violence, and dangerous conflicts in the city. For the people of Rome, the appearance of the Vigiles often brings hope amidst disaster. But for these firefighters themselves, each assignment could be their last return home. And while their work is incredibly dangerous, even more terrifying professions await them. Number 5. Roman Navy SEALs. For the Romans, the Mediterranean was more than just a sea. They called it Mare Nostrum, our sea. This vast sea connected 3 continents, transported food, goods, troops, and maintained control over an empire spanning thousands of kilometers. But while emperors and generals enjoyed the fruits of this expansion, the sailors faced the most direct danger. Life at sea in Roman times was completely different from what we imagine today. There was no radar. There was no weather forecasting system. There were no modern engines. Everything depended on the wind, the captain's experience, and sometimes even luck. A seemingly ordinary voyage could quickly turn into a disaster. Storms in the Mediterranean often appeared unexpectedly. When strong winds arose, enormous sails could be torn apart in minutes. Huge waves relentlessly pounded the wooden hulls, cracking the joints and threatening to sink the ship at any moment. In such situations, sailors had to work tirelessly. They climbed the towering masts amidst the fierce gales to gather the sails. They used buckets to bail out water continuously to keep the ship from sinking. A single slip on the wet deck could send a person plunging into the sea. And that was almost a death sentence. Surprisingly, many people at that time did not know how to swim, including sailors. Even those who could swim found it difficult to survive amidst the large waves and strong currents. But the sea was not the only threat. For centuries, piracy was a nightmare for Roman shipping lanes. They often ambushed merchant ships or lone vessels. If captured, sailors could be killed, sold into slavery, or abandoned at sea. Even during wartime, danger was ever present. Ancient naval battles took place at very close range. Warships rammed into each other at high speed, attempting to pierce the hulls of their opponents with their prows. When 2 ships collided, sailors could be crushed, thrown into the water, or trapped on the sinking vessel. What made seafaring particularly dangerous was the inability to predict where the threat would come from. A calm day at sea could turn into a deadly storm in just a few hours. A normal trade voyage could end in a pirate attack, and a military mission could turn into a mass grave at sea. However, despite all the dangers, sailors were the ones who kept the lifeblood of the Roman Empire running. Without them, Rome would not have been able to import food, maintain trade, or deploy troops to distant lands. However, no matter how fearsome the sea may be, there are still those who face danger on land every day. In position number 4, we will meet the people who contributed to building the great wonders of Rome, but at the cost of deadly risks on these colossal construction sites. Number 4. Workers. Built Roman wonders today. When we look at the Colosseum, the Pantheon, or the colossal aqueducts that still stand after nearly 2,000 years, We often admire the extraordinary engineering prowess of the Romans. These structures helped make Rome one of the greatest civilizations in history. But there's a question few people ask. Who actually built them? The answer is tens of thousands of workers, slaves, and craftsmen who spent years toiling in extremely dangerous conditions. Unlike modern construction sites with cranes, helmets, and strict safety standards, Roman structures were built using human power, animal power, and relatively simple mechanical equipment. Each stone block could weigh from several hundred kilograms to many tons. To lift them to high places, workers had to use a system of pulleys, ropes, and wooden cranes. Just one broken rope or a damaged support point could send the entire massive block of stone plummeting to the ground below in an instant. And when that happened, the consequences were often catastrophic. Many workers had to work on scaffolding dozens of meters high. These temporary structures were often made of wood and were not always strong enough to withstand the weight of the construction materials or the large number of workers. A misstep, a rotten plank, or a sudden strong gust of wind, all of these could cause a worker to fall from a deadly height. Besides falls from heights, they also faced prolonged exhaustion. Work often began early in the morning and continued until sunset. Under the scorching sun of Italy or the southern provinces of the empire, the constant lifting, pulling, and transporting of heavy materials quickly exhausted the body. Injuries were also commonplace. Broken bones, crushed limbs, or serious injuries caused by tools could render a person permanently incapacitated. In the pre-modern era, even seemingly minor wounds could lead to dangerous infections. Remarkably, despite all these risks, the Romans completed structures that many modern engineers admire. Every stone in the Colosseum, every column in the temples, or every section of the aqueduct is a testament to the arduous labor of people who were virtually unknown in history. They were not sculpted into statues. They were not celebrated for military victories. But it was they who brought these audacious designs to life. Number 3. Animal hunters for the arena. For the people of ancient Rome, nothing brought greater excitement than the wild animal performances in the arena. Tens of thousands of spectators flocked to the Colosseum to witness roaring lions, cheetahs charging at terrifying speeds, or giant bears from distant lands appearing before them. But before these animals could become the centerpiece of the performances, someone had to find, capture, and transport them back to Rome. That was the job of animal hunters. It sounds like a thrilling adventure, but in reality, it was one of the most dangerous professions of the ancient world. To meet the enormous entertainment needs of the Romans, hunting expeditions were often sent to North Africa, the Middle East, and many of the empire's far-flung frontiers. There they faced some of the most dangerous animals on the planet directly: lions, cheetahs, hyenas, bears, even elephants and rhinos. Remarkably, they had no modern technology to assist them. No guns, no tranquilizers, no armored vehicles or specialized cages like today. Everything relied on experience, courage, and sometimes recklessness. To catch a live adult lion, hunters often had to use pit traps, large nets, or specially designed wooden cages. But even when the animal was trapped, the danger didn't end. A cornered animal often becomes more aggressive than ever. Just a moment of distraction can lead to deadly consequences. Many hunters were bitten, attacked, or trampled in their pursuit of prey. And even when the hunt was successful, the real challenge began. The animals had to be transported hundreds, even thousands of kilometers to Rome. During that long journey, the wild animals frequently tried to break out of their cages or attack their handlers. A broken cage or an unlocked door could turn the entire convoy into a target for a panicked animal. Some ancient records even show that many people died not during the hunt itself, but during the transportation of the animals to the arena. Ironically, most of the spectators in Rome were unaware of these dangers. They only saw the end result: the ferocious beasts appearing in the arena and providing hours of entertainment. Meanwhile, behind the scenes were the people who had risked their lives to bring them there. These hunters lived in an environment where the line between hunter and prey was thinner than ever. Therefore, they deservedly ranked third on the list of the most dangerous jobs in ancient Rome. Number 2, mining. If there was one place in the Roman Empire that most people would rather not set foot in, it was the mines. For thousands of ancient laborers, especially slaves, prisoners of war, and convicted criminals, being taken down into the mines was almost tantamount to receiving a slow death sentence. On the surface, the gold, silver, copper, and iron mines were the precious resources that made Rome rich and powerful. The metals from the mines were used to mint coins, manufacture weapons, build structures, and sustain the entire imperial economy. But behind that prosperity lay the harsh lives of those who had to mine them. Every day, miners had to venture deep underground through narrow, dark, and suffocating tunnels. In many places, the only light came from small oil lamps, insufficient to dispel the darkness that enveloped them. The air inside the tunnels was often thick with rock dust. Each swing of the pickaxe, each chiseling of the rock walls, created tiny clouds of dust that the workers inhaled into their lungs for hours on end. Day after day, month after month, year after year, many began to experience shortness of breath, persistent coughing, and serious health deterioration. Although the Romans didn't fully understand the cause, we now know that this environment could cause dangerous lung diseases. However, the rock dust wasn't the greatest threat. The most terrifying was the risk of tunnel collapse. Tunnels were often dug deeper and deeper in search of ore. But the deeper they went, the greater the pressure from the rock above. Just one broken support or an unstable section of the rock wall could cause tons of earth and rock to fall in seconds. Those trapped below had almost no chance of rescue. There were no excavators. There were no rescue equipment. There was no modern technology to locate victims. Furthermore, there was the risk of oxygen deprivation and suffocation. Some deep underground areas had very poor air circulation. Workers frequently felt dizzy, tired, and exhausted. In severe cases, they could lose consciousness at work. What made life even worse for miners was the long working hours. Many had to work from sunrise to sunset, or even longer. For slaves, rest was almost a luxury. If productivity decreased or they disobeyed orders, they could be punished immediately. Ancient historians described some Roman mines as places where people were worn down faster than in any other profession. Many entered the mines young, but never lived to see old age. Therefore, many modern researchers consider mining to be one of the most grueling jobs in the ancient world. For these workers, each day descending into the mines was a gamble with fate. They didn't know if they would return to the surface when their shift ended. And while that was already terrifying enough to place miners at number 2 on today's list, there was one job that stood above all others. A profession where the risk of death wasn't hidden in the shadows or a sudden, unexpected event. And finally, at number 1, death appeared right before everyone's eyes. Amidst the cheers of tens of thousands of spectators in the most famous arena of the ancient world. Number 1, Gladiator. Finally, we've reached number 1 on the list of the most dangerous jobs in ancient Rome. This is also the most famous, most talked about, and to this day remains one of the most recognizable symbols of Roman civilization. That is the gladiator. When thinking of gladiators, many people picture powerful warriors entering the Colosseum amidst the resounding cheers of tens of thousands of spectators. They were considered stars of the ancient world. Some became famous throughout the empire. Their names appeared on murals, sculptures, and even had fervent fans, much like famous athletes today. But behind that glamour lay a brutal reality. Each time they stepped into the arena, they were gambling with their very lives. Not all gladiators were slaves. Some were prisoners of war, convicted criminals, or volunteers hoping to earn money and fame. However, regardless of their background, they all endured an extremely harsh life. Training was daily and intense. They had to learn to use a variety of weapons, from short swords, spears, and shields to nets and tridents. The fights demanded not only strength but also speed, skill, and the ability to make split-second decisions. A small mistake could cost them their lives. What made gladiators particularly dangerous was the nature of their work. Unlike soldiers who could go months or years without fighting, gladiators were trained with the sole purpose of fighting in public. Spectators flocked to the arena seeking thrills. They wanted to witness intense confrontations, fierce battles, and breathtaking moments. Although organizers often tried to protect high-value fighters, serious injuries occurred frequently. Sharp swords, sharp spears, heavy shields, hard falls onto the sand, all could cause serious injury in seconds. In the age before antibiotics, a seemingly ordinary wound could become fatal. Infection was the silent killer that gladiators constantly faced. Many survived the fight but died days or weeks later from medical complications. In addition to fighting human opponents, some gladiators also had to perform with wild animals. Imagine standing in the middle of a vast arena, surrounded by tens of thousands of cheering spectators, while a lion or leopard lunges towards you. That's not a scene from a movie. That's the reality some gladiators faced. The psychological pressure was also immense. Each time the arena gates opened, no one knew what would happen next. Would they emerge victorious today to cheers? Or would it be the last day of their lives? That tension could last for years. However, it was precisely this deadly danger that made gladiators such special figures in Roman society. They lived on the thin line between glory and death. One day, they might be hailed as heroes by thousands. The next day, they could fall on the sands of the arena and be forgotten by history. Perhaps most astonishingly, despite knowing the dangers, some people voluntarily became gladiators in exchange for a chance at a better life. For the impoverished, fame and rewards from the fights were sometimes worth more than safety. But in every respect, from the risk of serious injury and the ever-present possibility of death to the immense mental pressure, no profession on today's list presents a more direct and clear confrontation with death than that of a gladiator. That is why the gladiator rightfully ranks #1 on the list of the most dangerous jobs in ancient Rome. And looking back at the entire list, from sewer cleaners, firefighters in the midst of flames, sailors at sea, construction workers on massive construction sites, hunters in the wilderness, miners in the shadows, to gladiators in the arena, we can see a clear truth. The greatness of the Roman Empire was built not only by emperors and generals, but also by countless ordinary people who accepted daily dangers to keep an entire civilization running. Looking back at the history of ancient Rome, we often remember powerful emperors, invincible armies, and magnificent structures that have stood for millennia. But behind all those achievements are ordinary people rarely mentioned in history. These include sewer cleaners working in the shadows to keep the city running, vigiles firefighters rushing into flames while others tried to escape, sailors navigating the Mediterranean to maintain trade routes and supplies for the empire. There are also construction workers who spent years toiling on colossal construction sites, hunters facing the world's most dangerous animals, and miners living and working in harsh underground conditions. And finally, the gladiators, who entered the arena knowing that each battle could be the last of their lives. Despite their different jobs, they all have one thing in common. They were people who took enormous risks for the survival and prosperity of one of the most powerful empires in human history. Perhaps most astonishingly, after more than 2,000 years, many modern professions still carry similar risks. This reminds us that behind every thriving city, every great structure, and every successful civilization, there are people silently performing the most difficult and dangerous jobs. Which job on today's list do you think is the scariest? Is it the miners buried underground, the hunters facing wild beasts, or the gladiators fighting before tens of thousands of spectators? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy fascinating historical stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. Thank you for watching until the end of the video, and see you again on our journey to discover the most fascinating secrets of the ancient world.